I think people who have been around a lot of suicide, and unfortunately I am such a person, we have a very different relationship with discussion of suicide. Obviously, no one knows how destructive and sad suicide can be more than those who have been around it, but it's also familiar and something we have had to come to terms with. I treat suicide pretty much like I treat other tragic circumstances of death. I think people without as much experience with suicide are more likely to treat it as taboo than to treat it as sad. I think the idea of being suicidal is very unnerving, just as a concept for most people, and if your only experience with it is an idea, then it is both more existential and also easier to avoid or ignore. I think it is very important to confront not only the actual suicides that happen in our lives and reckon with them in real, honest ways, but also to confront the ideas of suicide for this reason, because ideas are the way that a lot of people relate to suicide. This video is going to address suicide and is going to address ideas of suicide that you will probably find to be reprehensible. I certainly do. But I think they're worth reckoning with, and I promise if you hang in there, this video will be hopeful overall. So yeah, this is the most serious intro I've ever done. How the hell do I transition out of this? Welcome to Daily Metal, where every day a different metal album gets dissected for your sadistic listening pleasure. I'm the heavy metal lawyer, Emma. And in this show, I'll talk about why the music in these albums is so good and where they fall in the history of music's most wretched genre. On August 11th, 2014, Icelandic depressive black metal band Null guided listeners through the canyons of gloom with their single-track album Null and Void. Null, which the band usually spells with a 0 or an O or with an acute accent on the U, Null. Depressive black metal is exactly what it sounds like, black metal dealing with depression and especially with suicide. Of course, black metal infamously has connections with depression and suicide out of this niche within the subgenre. Most infamously, the suicide of Mayhem vocalist whose nickname was Dead. Dead's bandmate Euronymous reacted to his suicide by taking pictures of it before calling the police, pictures which would be used in the band's live album, The Dawn of the Black Hearts. Not everyone in the scene was so callous about Dead's suicide. Mayhem's bassist, Necro Butcher, left the band in response to Euronymous' actions, which led to Varg joining the band, which in turn led to Varg killing Euronymous 2 years later. But depressive black metal, also referred to as depressive suicidal black metal or DSBM, is specifically black metal that tries to evoke depression and suicide with its tone as well as with lyrics and imagery. Often credited as starting depressive black metal is the band Shining, started in Sweden in 1996 by Niklas Kvarforth. However, while the band may or may not have in fact started the subgenre, I think the similarities end there, and Kvarforth actually agrees with me. The attitude of Shining to suicide is a lot like the attitude of Euronymous to the suicide of Dead, except somehow even worse. To quote Kvarforth, quote, "Of course we support suicide. Shining support all that is negative in this bastard world of ours. We have had a couple of cases in the past with people whom have ended their lives under the influence or partially under the influence of our work, And of course, this is a true blessing indeed, yet we pray for increased numbers of fatalities. As I mentioned, Kabarforth himself doesn't associate with depressive black metal anymore because it focuses on bands trying to express their own struggles with depression, sometimes even in a therapeutic way, whereas he is just a dumb edgelord who wants to try to get people to kill themselves, like if 4chan were a black metal band. If you wanted any confirmation that this guy is a loser, he also faked his own suicide as a publicity stunt for the band. The fact that he thinks people willing to actually face their demons are weak when he is literally a suicide poser is truly astounding. When it comes to depressive black metal, the albums that I would go to and cite, and I think a lot of people would, both lyrically and musically, would be the 10th sub-level of Suicide by Leviathan, or Il était une forêt by Gris. Leviathan's music is ambient and atmospheric. It makes you feel cold and empty. Gris is musically more like the band's ethos of balance, combining soaring, airy synthesizers with a more traditional black metal sound. Leviathan's lyrics often narrate suicide, like from the song At the Door to the 10th sub-level of Suicide, quote, I bid the body farewell, slumped down in cold history, a voice to drown out, taken in my own hand. As I mentioned, Gris is all about the idea of balancing, particularly the balance of joy and depression, black and white. The word gris is gray in French. In their song Veux-tu danser, Do You Want to Dance, the band vacillates from Pardonnez-moi, je n'aurais pas dû rester plâtré dans vos vies. Or in English, forgive me, I shouldn't have stayed plastered in your lives. But then later in the same song sings Et toi alors, veux-tu toujours tu fondre en mon cœur, tu me fier? Or in English, what about you? Do you still want to melt into my swollen heart? I'm a big fan of Leviathan musically, save the misogynist album that I don't have time to address today. Not so much a fan of Gris, but they really do nail the earnest feelings of depression and suicidal ideation in their lyrics. I'm just not a big fan of them musically. So our album, Null and Void, a one-track, 34-minute long epic. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to find lyrics to this amazing piece, so I couldn't tell you with any certainty whether or not they are the kind of hateful and sadistic messages about suicide you hear in Shining's music, or the more personable narration of depression and suicide you hear in a lot of other depressive black metal. You know, the black metal style vocals, yeah, no idea what they're saying. No idea if they're even singing in Icelandic or in English, because every word is screamed, and every scream, and this is a very common thing in depressive black metal, every scream is drawn out until it just becomes this inhuman, haunting howl, which sounds really cool, but you can't understand anything they're saying. Musically, the track certainly has the guitar tones of black metal and the gloomy sound overall, but the guitar solos are actually reminiscent of 70s progressive rock music, and the rhythm has this rocking quality that is certainly slower and more meandering than the blast beats and tremolo guitar black metal, but it's still faster than a lot of the atmospheric depressive black metal, which is quite refreshing to hear on a 34-minute long track. Usually when I see a 34-minute long metal track, I know that I'm probably going to be in for a straight-up drone track or just the slowest doom metal possible. While again I have no idea what is being sung on this album, when you put together the pained vocals, the mournful chanting in the backup vocals, the earnestly depressing album cover, and the interesting, unique take on black metal as a music, I think this album probably fits into the category of depressive black metal that Kavarforth hates and that I like, both because he hates it and because it is often interesting and compelling. Null refers to themselves as the heralds of futility, and their slogan of sorts is a simple 2 words, seek not, which I believe is whispered in the album about 13 minutes in, though not 100% sure of that. It's such an interesting slogan. I really spent a lot of time thinking about this for making this video. It could mean both, don't seek suicide, or it could mean don't seek hope, don't seek to survive. Or maybe it means not to seek meaning at all. That might be projection on my part because, the way that I deal with depression and depressing things is a sort of acceptance of the meaninglessness of existence. Seek not is also the beginning of the Bible verse Ecclesiasticus 3:21, which goes, seek not out things that are too hard for thee, neither search the things that are above thy strength, which definitely sounds like something a depressive black metal band might reference. And returning to the amazing album cover for a second, seriously, I'm obsessed with this album cover. It's one of the best black metal album covers I've ever seen. The fact that it is a depressing landscape, to me, evokes the idea that Null is exploring feelings of depression and suicidal ideation on this project, guiding the listener through these gloomy mountains, rather than taking you to the cliff to push you off of it, like a band like Shining tries to do. The philosopher Albert Camus famously remarked, there is only one really serious philosophical problem, and that is suicide. Deciding whether or not life is worth living is to answer the fundamental question in philosophy. For Camus, the answer to the question, and to me one of the most compelling ever given, is to be fully conscious of the bitterness of life, to avoid false solutions such as religion, to refuse to submit to the bitterness of life, and to carry on with vitality and intensity. That's why I find something like Shining to be so stupid and petty and cheap, and why I find the more therapeutic sort of depressive black metal to be so compelling. The best depressive black metal embodies Camus' response to the question of suicide. It accepts the bitterness of life, it rejects the false hopes like religion, it refuses to submit, and it expresses vitality and intensity, and that is exactly what you will hear on Null and Void. So, do you think depressive black metal can be therapeutic? Let me know in the comments, and if you like this video, please subscribe so you can find out what the metal album of the day is, why it is so brutal, and where it fits in the history of the genre.